So I want to apologize right from the outset because not only do you have to deal with an American accent, you have to deal with a New York accent. Later on top of that, you have to deal with a Staten Island accent. So I will try to speak slowly. I wish there were some subtitles so you could understand me more clearly. But this is as New York as you're going to get.
Well, it's wonderful to meet you.
May I go back to one? You mentioned the drought, and in the reading that I did, it seems that you finally have gotten some relief, though, in the form of rain. So things are turning around economically.
They are. So we had a drought that lasted about 8 or 9 years, and the last 12 months during that 2019 period was probably the most severe. But since early 2020, and definitely in the last 12 or 18 months, we've had really good rain. And because we're mostly an agricultural based area, that's really important to us. We have a combination of an irrigation industry where we grow a lot of horticultural products like onions, garlic, table grapes, things like that. So it has provided a bit more stability for that. And then for our broader agricultural area, so we're a large cattle producing area, sheep producing area. We grow irrigated cotton and other crops like barley and wheat and things like that. So it's definitely much improved and fairly a positive economic future at the moment.
That's great. Wow. That's great to hear. And how are things? How was like when I signed on? I heard you addressing COVID. How did you guys endure the pandemic?
Yeah, it's been quite different for Australia because our Prime Minister closed the borders externally quite early in the pandemic. I think it was late February 2020. So we've really been isolated as a country from a lot of the impacts that have occurred. And, you know, I have family in Canada that's obviously been quite impacted. But in Australia, I think at the moment we have less than 90 cases in the entire country. They are all in quarantine or in hospital because most of our cases come from people returning to Australia that are Australia citizens. And then their cases are picked up while they're doing their 2 weeks quarantine coming in. So generally speaking, as a population, we haven't been hugely impacted. I mean, we have had lockdowns on occasion, but they've been very short and sharp and mostly during 2020. So for the last 12 months, we've almost lived, you know, fairly normally, although we have other you know, precautions that are in place to protect us if there is a broader outbreak. And we've started heavily in our immunization program now. So lots of controversy about the vaccines and which ones should be used, but we are progressing, I think, slower than other countries because I know United States is well ahead of us with the vaccination program, but because we haven't really had a huge outbreak here, we've allowed, you know, it's been able to go slower and still get a great outcome. How's your experience been? Like,
it was it's been rough. Last year, the first 3 months was about chasing PPE and sanitizer, and then it kind of changed into actually chasing staff. We needed nursing help because we just burned through the staff at both of our hospitals. And because we're the smallest borough, we're always sort of last in line. And because politically, we tend to be more conservative than the rest of the city, and there's a mismatch in terms of our electoral power, we're always last. So our struggle was similar to places all across America, but it was probably a bit more acute because we are the sort of last in line here. And then you know, this is a, Lord help us, this is a of the 5 boroughs, this is the most pro-Trump, and the politics seeped into it in a big way. There's been we had at some points we led the city in terms of positivity rate of COVID, and there was a lot of reluctance to wear masks and real pushback against the messaging, which was incredibly infuriating. We've done well on the vaccination front. Interestingly enough, some of the folks who pushed back against social distancing were first online to get vaccinated. But it's been a tough go. Lots of angst about our restaurants and commercial establishments. Lots of animosity directed towards Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio. And we had a few really ugly moments that made national news, which were a real embarrassment. Outside a bar who wanted to stay open, and so it's been a heck of an experience for everyone. But we're hoping brighter days are not that far away in terms of continuing to open up the economy and really get the vaccination penetration to the point where you can start, doing away with the masks, at least in public. So
how has the experience been for your businesses? Like you mentioned, obviously hospitality heavily impacted, but you guys also have a pretty good tourism industry, don't you? So have your businesses fared, or what is the outcome, or, what does the future look like for you guys?
Yeah, the tourism for New York City, we were setting records every year. Every time you think you hit a number that will be it, more and more folks are coming. So obviously that ended. If you were to go to Manhattan and if you were familiar with Manhattan and then drive through it, you would be really astounded at how many businesses were shuttered.
Yeah, right.
Major skyscrapers had and continue to have like 10 or 15% occupancy, and a lot of that, the fear is not coming back because we're going to go to a hybrid method. No one's going back 5 days a week to the office space. And so restaurants take a hit from that. Obviously hotels take a hit from that. Bars take a hit from that. And they haven't been allowed to open to full capacity yet. We have lots of restaurants and bars locally in the borough, and they've taken a hit. Jen San Martino is on the call, and Colleen head up our efforts on Staten Island to kind of get a bigger piece of the overall city pie. And they've done fantastic work, pushing a boulder up a hill every day. And we were making some really good progress. And now we have to reboot that, which is going to be difficult. And some folks have been really unreasonable. Add on top of that, if they had their way, they would have opened up everything right in the middle of the outbreak. So, but again, Jen, I'm sorry, do you want to add to that? Because I could talk to these ladies all day. So.
No, just maybe one or 2 points. One being that our hotels actually did okay, believe it or not. We had people that, we are sort of the southernmost of New York State. So we had a lot of people driving in from Pennsylvania and New Jersey. We have a lot of green space on Staten Island. We have the green belt, which is all just absolutely beautiful, natural space. So we have more hiking miles here than any place else in the city. So we actually, in terms of the hotels, they did pretty well in that people would take a weekend trip or a night away, just because we all got sick of looking at the four walls of our homes. Our homes became the school, it became work, it was everything. So they actually, I'm not saying that they're rolling in it, but they actually fared all right, given, the last year and a half. So that was really positive, to see that. Beyond that, we are a little bit different in terms of some of the other boroughs. So we do have that green space, and we do have access to water and things like that. So, I felt good that maybe some friends, from other locations came to visit, and some new people discovered Staten Island for the first time. So I'm a very glasses half full kind of person. So I'd like to think that there's some positive came out of this situation.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that ended up for us actually being a real positive in the end. I mean, we'd come out of those years of drought and our tourism figures were actually in decline. So when COVID hit, we'd already come up with a marketing plan to get people back. So the initial lockdown was a bit of a shock. But then after that, as soon as they allowed everybody to start moving, we had that same thing where everybody, and especially because we have space, people came west, and we ended up having a really good year in the end. And now we're actually starting to beat our figures from 2017, which was our highest year we'd had. So it's actually, I'm kind of in a way going, it's kind of nice that they've kept the borders shut and encouraging, Australians to travel within Australia. So as I said, so that has worked really well.
So if you take someone from Staten Island and drop her in parts of the rest of the city, or if you take someone from New York City and drop them in Utica, New York, which is north in New York State, or you take a New Yorker from anywhere in the state and you drop him or her in Georgia, the differences are stark and quite evident. From how we sound, talking about linguistic insecurity, how we sound, to our mannerisms, to how hectic we are or slow. So tell me about where you're from and the tourists that found you, how different they are. Australians who came from a different part of Australia, like what are the differences across the country?
I mean, we certainly do have some differences, but they're not as acute as they would be, in the States. I mean, there's certain sort of, you can tell if someone comes from South Australia, there's certain things they say differently or something like that. But on a whole, probably the biggest difference you'd get would be from a city person to someone from out somewhere like here. And it's probably, when you're out west, things are, a bit slower, you talk more slowly, you probably stand further away from each other, that kind of thing, where you get someone from the city who's in a hurry, who's got places to go and things to do. And so it's more about trying to slow them down. I suppose traditionally our travellers actually, though, the ones that we had been getting, they are more that kind of grey nomad, older generation who it's a very traditional thing here to, buy an RV, go do the big lap around Australia. And, when you're in retirement. So that's probably been our base. And they do tend to come from, the Melbourne and the Sydney, so the bigger cities, they do pack up and leave and come here. And obviously also Brisbane, one closest to us. So with COVID, though, we've had like a little bit of a change because it was all of those families and people who normally go overseas and, head off and travel. I had relatives who they were all meant to go to Italy last year and they'd never been west before ever. And they all individually came out and visited me and brought everybody and did a big trip around. So it was kind of that, because you do get the grey nomads who, of course, they've spent all that money on their RV. They want to, penny pinch a little along the way. So they don't traditionally spend huge amounts of money, but they will spend longer. But when you get this other sort of family crowd that was coming through, that were younger, they were spending more, staying longer, and really getting out and truly experiencing things and places and doing something they'd never done before.
The expression you use, I want to make sure I have this correctly, is grey nomad.
Yes, we call them a grey nomad, yes.
Does that not fit me, ladies? That's what I wanted. 250 days. But just to tell you, so the other day, I Googled how many days has it been since February 16th, 1999. That's the day I was first elected to the city council. And today I think is 8,101. Wow. Yeah, I have 200.
That's fantastic.
253 days left in my tenure as an elected official. and I'm looking forward to the next chapter. But I want to be a grey nomad.
Yeah, get your RV and go traveling around.
What do you guys call them in the United States? In Canada, we call them the snowbirds, but.
Yeah, snowbirds are the seniors from New York and Michigan, right? That would go down to Florida or warmer. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
grey nomad is so cool.
Yeah. Lots of them.
Yeah.
So tell me about what the letter said about the contest that you're in, and how can we help? Can we use our social media platform just to
We would love that. I mean, that was what it was all about. It sort of came out of that idea that I'd actually been overseas in a couple of other places that had been called St. George. And I was thinking, gosh, there's got to actually be a whole bunch of places called St. George that are around. And, you know, as we said, we're a small place with a very small population. And it's all about the public vote and getting people to vote for us. So it was that let's reach out to our mates around the world who come from a town or a place or a location called St. George and just see where this leads to and sort of do that whole let's extend a hand of friendship, you know. And I mean, obviously, we realize people can't come visit us at this point in time from your locations, but you never know when things open up. Maybe we can start doing that kind of reverse tourism. You come here, we go there, we send people around. But if you could, yeah, just encourage people to vote for us through your social media, that would be great.
So Jen and Colleen, what can we do?
Yeah.
We could do the whole Instagram, Twitter, and just let the world know that we have some friends from ways
looking
away.
at the date. It's the 22nd. I mean, Colleen, we could just blitz it all weekend long.
That would be great. I'm doing the same in Australia at the moment.
I know we actually I already spoke to Lauren about, so Kim, I think I showed you the Visit Staten Island.
Yes.
That's our tourism campaign, and I gave you some of the content. I do have slides if you're interested, but you know, we can always talk offline. But yeah, so I spoke with my colleague and we're going to put it out, and you know, we have a newsletter, we have all the social media, you know, platforms, you know, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We usually use Facebook more often. I'm actually curious. I don't know what platforms you use, because I would love to follow you as well. But we would absolutely love to share this out because it's very cool. And I just wanted to say one thing quickly, Kim, is that and of course, Mayor, is what really resonated with me from looking at your website of St. George is that it had very a lot of similarities with Staten Island, because you know, you talked about being green and being get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, and that's kind of what that's like the same messaging that we have as well, because people come to Staten Island to get away from Manhattan, from the hustle and bustle. So I just really loved that we have the same messaging along the same aspects and features. So I just think it's so great.
So who knows, maybe we could get something across, you know, the rest of the city that goes a little viral, and we could have a little fun with it and help you guys win.
Thanks so much for that. I really appreciate, like, when Kim came up with the idea of contacting all the St. Georges around the world, we weren't too sure how we'd go. So to be honest, we really appreciate the contact back. I know you guys must get swamped with all sorts of requests, so was just totally stoked to hear a shout back from you guys, and to have a meeting with you today is fantastic.